So I think for today's presentation, I will talking about from the energy perspective. And if I'm looking at the region, I will focus on Southeast Asia. It might be interesting why a guy from China actually look at Southeast Asia is largely because my past experience. In my 20 plus years work experience, I stay equal amount in Australia and China, that is 7.5 in both. But I also spent 6 years in Southeast Asia, living in 3 countries, Indonesia, Brunei, and Singapore. And initially as working for international organizations to service all the 16 East Asia Summit member countries for 3.5 years. And then work as an advisor for Brunei Energy Minister. And finally moved to Singapore, the National University of Singapore, before I moved to Australia. I think probably we have 2 excellent panelists that work on Chinese issues. I probably will focus a little bit on Southeast Asia. But my presentation actually will support the statement just by Ms. Shaoquett and Sara. As you will see that it's Asia century in the energy, we will call that. This slide shows actually the increase of energy consumption in 2018, except from the US, the top 3 or top 4, 3 or the top 4 actually from Asia. This is just brief idea what happened. But Asia, we also is the global focus. Why? Because we also have a very low level of energy consumption. We can argue that low may be good for some, but in the reality is that our life quality is closely linked to our energy consumption. If you look at the relevant about electricity consumption, you know that average Australia will consume more than 10,000 kilowatt hour, but in Indonesia there is only 800. And on the last slide, you will see actually we still have many countries who are half of the population who don't access to electricity, like Myanmar, Cambodia, and those. Those are actually big challenges linked to Asia. It's our focus in the energy sector. And partly because that, and partly because of the fast economic growth. This slide shows between 2016 to 2040, the increase of global energy consumption. The larger the bubble, the larger the size. As you can see that if you look at global level, the most energy consumption will come from Asia, primarily China, India, Southeast Asia, which Southeast Asia, as well as Middle East. So if you look at globally landscape, so we call this the Asia century is the energy. You look at the next 2 decades and above. That's a brief idea actually what happened or will likely happen in Asia in the energy field. Because we are from Australia, so I actually looking more actually from Australia perspective, what does that mean for us? This is I took from the Department of Industry, the very, very recent Resource and Energy quarterly. The idea I want to just show you that in terms of Asia, if you look at from energy sector, we look at the 3 export of energy to the market. The 3 actually, they separate coal into 2. One is metallurgical or coking coal used for steel manufacture. Another is a thermal coal for power generation. So in Australia, they separate coal into 2 camps. We also have LNG. So roughly idea that the 3, actually these are the top 3 export except iron ore. So it's the most important export commodity from Australia. So the first we look at the coking coal, the metallurgical. Australia produce or export half of the global supplier. And if you look at the destination of Australia export, more than actually 90% go to Asia. That's exactly why doing business with, Sarah mentioned doing business with Asia is happening. And also, Ms. Shaoquett mentioned that we are sitting in Asia. If you look at the energy export, 90% go to Asia. That's your customer, that's your market. And if you look at thermal coal, which is used for power generation, it's more or less the same story. Actually, even more stronger. 97% of Australia export go to Asia. Primarily, look at both the metallurgical and thermal coal Even the ranking are different, but the primary market is China, Japan, India. We may argue coal has some environmental impact. That's another story. But if you look at the current business, that is where actually you will have it. And another very interesting is natural gas, or if in the export case, we liquefy the gas, become LNG, liquefied natural gas, LNG. Again, 95% of natural gas going to, I think 97% of Australian natural gas going to Asia. If you remember, by this year, Australia is the world's largest LNG exporter, or put another way, largest liquefied gas exporter. That's all going to Asia. It's a lot of surprise because from import side, Asia import 70%, more than 70% of the global traded natural gas. With the current largest importer is Japan and followed by China. I think the Chinese import 30% of liquefied natural gas from Australia, and Australia supply half of the global Japan's import. In the next few years, China will become the world's largest energy import. Currently, is number 2 after Japan, but soon will be the world's largest one. So that actually also supports the importance of relationship between Australia and Asia, as well as Australia and China. If you look at it from the energy perspective, these are the currently happening things. What probably many people didn't realize that happening things is Australia also have a possibility to export electricity, particularly we call it clean electricity. This one took for one of my paper published a few months ago. We look at actually the possibility to connect Australia with Asia through Indonesia. We all know that Asia has the largest energy demand growth in the future. So this is where the market we can do. And also we all know that in Australia, particularly in the west part, we look at the Pilbara areas, we have huge land or unoccupied deserts, which is good for solar power generation. Where I think about the combine the solar power with gas turbines to provide a stable supply and export to Asia. So in that case, actually, we will see why Asia is so important, because if you link Australia grid with the Asia grid, the gateway will be Indonesia and Southeast Asia. The good thing is that Southeast Asia also is in badly lead electric supply. As I just mentioned, for Indonesia, the capital electric consumption is only 800 kilowatt, but in Australia, we are 10,000 above. So there's a huge difference. And this slide shows the Southeast Asia, we call it ASEAN. It's called the Association of Southeast Asia. The 10 ASEAN countries collectively call this. It shows the increased demand of energy and also power generation. So there will be a very significant increase. So this is the overall market. And more importantly, the Southeast Asia actually are trying to integrate this region. Remember, we have 10 countries and it's archipelago. It's very difficult, but why they need it collected? Because the resources are distributed unevenly. For example, most of the hydropower is in the, we call it Great Mekong sub-regions. That's clean, at least actually from low emission perspective is clean, but there is social impact, so there's always dispute. But the good thing is that they have a lot of this potential, but there's no demand, because we all know that currently the demand center is more like in Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, or even Indonesia. So that's the reason in Southeast Asia actually try to link. The link create a good opportunity for investment. I think the ADB mentioned that Southeast Asia need in the next 20 years need more than $2 trillion investment, which they don't have that. So it's a good opportunity for Australia, not just export electricity, but invest in the energy sector for power generation, as obviously. And that's actually Australia's future export now is emerging on the, I think, public debate, a lot of study yet, but this took from CSIRO report, is export of hydrogen. Hydrogen, in the energy sector, we call it the ultimate solution to the transport sector. Currently, we are talking about the renewable energy that are primarily for power generation, but in the transport sector, we still use petrol. Hydrogen is produced from water. You split the water into hydrogen and oxygen, and at the vehicles, you combine them again, hydrogen and vehicle and oxygen to produce electricity and supply. Australia actually, I think in the science communities discuss the possibility for export produce hydrogen from Australia wind and solar power, which is clean, and export to Asia. If you look at the forecasting, 100% go to Asian market. So this will be the future new exporter, kind of electricity, but you don't rely on power grid. So those are the states from any sector what are happening or what will be happening and why Asia is so important. If you can see all this, the Asian market will be 90 and probably 95% of the either current or future energy export from Australia. But there are actually quite a significant challenge. So one is energy transition. If we remember in the past the political debate whether we develop more renewable energy or not, that is part of in the energy sector we call the transition. People say we get enough fossil fuel because it produce emission. We want clean energy. This actually happened. On the left panel is the total energy. On the right panel is the power generation mix. You see that the whatever coal, gas is slightly different. Gas because they actually increase the share, but significant decline from coal and oil. And renewable energy get more market share, particularly in the power generation more significant. In the past 10 years, renewable increased a lot. That actually poses a significant challenge for Australia export. Coal as well actually natural gas, both are fossil fuel. And in the coal case, we all know that China is the big player because China consumes and produces 50% of the global coal. So if you look at the coal sector story, currently so far it will be China's story. But in the future, India's story will replace China's story because China now already determined to limit the coal consumption. And that overall is a global trend, except India, because I think India still figure out actually how to produce electricity for their people. I think for India, they still have more than roughly 300 million people didn't have electric access, and this is data from 2016. So it's a huge amount of people who don't have electricity access at this moment. So in that sense, they put actually coal maybe a solution. But China, because the global hub actually now shared the story. So over the long terms for Australia exporting fossil fuel, there's a significant challenge. Even gas is rising, but that's for middle and short terms. However, this kind of transition will not always bring bad news for Australia. Here I show you example for China's benchmark price for coal. I want to highlight that like in 2016, the price at the floor level, but within actually half a year, the price almost doubled. That because China's supply side reform, they try to cut the production from some coal mine units, dangerous, less environment friendly. Because actually this kind of supply cut is more than demand cut, you see the bounce back of price. What that means? Because Australia is a net export, almost 300 million ton coal, and the price will going up. So in the short term, with the policy intervention in Asia, Australia benefit a lot. Or on the reverse side, maybe actually will suffer a lot. So that another story means that what happened in Asia will really matter for Australia. And the LNG market also very interesting. As I mentioned, that Australia is the world's largest LNG market, overtake Qatar as a number one this year. But the market now faces some dynamics. One of the significant dynamics is the price change. In the past, Australia LNG priced against the oil price. If you remember, around 2017, there were a lot of debates say why our export to Asia market is cheaper than our domestic market. It's because the price mechanism. The price is linked to oil price with some time lag. So when the global oil price is low, Australia export will be very low. But the price mechanism is being challenges is because the panel on below, because Asia finds that they pay higher price after 2011. They say, oh, the reason could be our link to oil price. Then fair enough, we don't want the link, we just want to the gas price to be price on gas competition. We call it the harbor price. So this is the global scale. You can see that in Asia, the primary index formula is oil indexation, but it's a lot of global phenomenon. In the North American, the price already based on gas competition, or I would say the harbor indexation. And Europeans in the middle of transition. Asia say, okay, we get a different price, we get paid a higher price, so I think it's unfair, we will move there. But what does that mean for Australia? I did this study in 2015, it's a little bit outdated. I think the last slide will show that even China alone changed the price mechanism from the so-called oil indexation to harbor indexation. Australia, the gas sector, will lose the total profit of 11%. The other two scenarios depend on what kind of restrictions are removed. Currently, there are a lot of restrictions on the contract. Means that I think the overall message is that if price become more harbor index or more price on gas competition, and the contract more liberalized, Australia will be disadvantaged. This is a big stake. Many people probably didn't realize. In the Accurate, I present a fact sheet mentioned that Australia currently, the first contract to be expired with China is 2031. The others probably to 2040. But the European case show once the destination market is liberalized, the price terms, the contract term will be changed. There are a lot of complicated issues that I wouldn't go much detail. Probably 15 papers on these issues. And the last slide, I want to actually touch a little bit about the energy investment in Southeast Asia. It's also from I just published a paper a few weeks ago. I think energy investment is, we all know that it's complicated because first it's a large size, it takes long terms, the process and leading time, construction, operation times, and also linked to national security. Make it very complicated. More importantly, if something goes wrong, it cannot pull out because it's all physical infrastructure in that sense. And there are a lot of environmental social concerns like the hydro case. Those actually create a lot of challenge for energy investment itself. And if you look at it, Southeast Asia, even we just mentioned there is a huge market opportunity, they are also quite challenged. The market opportunity is from the infrastructure we mentioned, but the challenge is that usually the per capita GDP in South Asia is very low and quite different. In Cambodia, Myanmar, it's actually around $1,000 per capita per head, but in Australia we are more than 50,000. So you can see the difference. The affordability is very low, and also, as Sara just mentioned, that the same Asia is generally the lack of a reliable legal system, and the law enforcement is very weak, and also the lack of transparency and the institutional framework to facilitate a perfect investment from Australia. But fair enough, that is the challenges, and you cannot get it overnight. But how to do business? Same like Sara mentioned that we name it kind of a sense of ownership approach. Based on my living and work with in Southeast Asia, it's more important to get a local partner, get the stakeholder to accept your investment. We wrote this paper in the context of China's Belt and Road. We find that what the outsider often come to say, okay, I help you this, you are in bad need, you are in trouble, I help you. But people say, no, sorry, I don't feel I need it. In that case, even you come there with good intention, you could still end up with bad result. That means even for the so-called aid program, not even mention the other project. So the key for Southeast Asia is that because of spatial culture and other religious reasons, if you want to do business with them, it's not just comparative advantage. You have to let them know, I have a need or develop my comparative advantage. I have a need to accept the investment. I have a need to partner with you. And doing that, actually, you will need a local partner and building key sense of ownership with the relative stakeholders there. I think that probably one of the solutions before you have a perfect legal system like Australia and other developed countries. You do business and minimum your risk. I think that is all my presentation. And if anybody is interested, I'm happy to answer questions later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Shi, for that broad coverage on Southeast Asia and trade in that area. It's new to us. It's a lot of information that we usually get here is particularly on China, but this is a very important presentation, and I do thank you very much. One most important point that I note that although we are stuck on coal in Australia, this is an important message to those people who should focus on energy, on renewable energy and good clean energy, because that's the future, as Dr. Shi has clearly indicated.